Okay. Today we will see the placement of JavaScript block. I was talking about the script block could be anywhere in your document. Uh, I mean HTML. So we'll see various places which would be fine within the DOM. Within the body tag, I would be more appropriate because that's where we are going to work and that's where we are going to add our uh, DOMs, which is going to be visible. And also we'll see various options to uh, capture the action, or be it a button or radio button or maybe something else. And we'll also see one more example on uh, jQuery with the dynamic page loading. Like as the user click on the buttons, user is going to be taken to another page or another link. So what all the alternate options are available so that we can dynamically load that as well. So it's all we are inching towards a mobile application compatibility. The last exercise I hope you guys completed, that also trying to address uh, the mobile compatibility, like the page should look well in mobile phone so that the content is spread with a given width. So we had used jQuery to dynamically handle the DOM, I mean the width and height uh, through a document resize, I mean window resize option. So I'm going to extend it further. Probably I need to get rid of this template now because we've been using this quite longer. So we better do some other example uh, to have this part working. Before that, I would like to also complete the various options to handle the JavaScript array. So far we have seen array push, which will add the new element at the end of the array. We also saw array splice, which does both the job. For example, it can also add an array in a given index or maybe replace the array in a given index, and also has the capability to delete an array within the index value whatever we give. But apart from that, we also have a couple of other methods, so that those things also will complete, then we'll move on from this example. Later, I would like to add one more example. First, we need to create a layout which looks like in a calculator. That was I was talking about. So that exercise we will move on a little further. How many absentees today? So typically, this is the regular absentees, or that's a problem if weekend holidays comes in between. Okay, I'll try to see if I can make it a smaller example so that others can also follow. But let's see, cannot guarantee that every time. As far as this example, we have already added jQuery. I've used 2.1.3, but you can use any version, 1.x or 2.x, depending on your requirement. If you are addressing for mobile phones, I would recommend using jQuery 2.x because most of the mobile phone browsers are latest, and we don't need to worry about having a backward compatibility to a legacy browser version such as IE 6, 7, 8 or something like that. So we don't need to worry about that if you are addressing for mobile phones. It's up to you because jQuery version 2.x adds various feature, and of course it's a minified file size, very smaller size, because it doesn't have junk codes which required to add a backward compatibility for older browsers. So the size itself is very less. Uh, that will in turn speed up the loading time, because remember the script, the jQuery part which we are adding at the top, if it is a page is loaded, naturally page is going to be loaded from the starting file, I mean on top of the file, and going to go to the end of the file. So if the time is taken for loading the JavaScript, if it takes time, naturally your page loading will impact, so will take time if the file size is quite big. So it depends, so what you need to choose. And also we have flexibility to load the JavaScript at the end of the document instead of on the top. That will improve your page loading time if your JavaScript stuff is more and has a number of lines of code. And a script could be put anywhere, but I'm going to look for a place where somewhere at the end of the body tag, so that other DOMs would be ready and the JavaScript can take over the control. But to identify which place is better, we have to do some other example to identify whether my JavaScript is working or not. If not working, why it is not working. So adjusting the place of my JavaScript will, is there any way I can address the issue. Also, I introduced couple of methods, listeners or binders or something like that. So this particular document on ready function, if a document is ready and of course it is loaded the entire DOMs, and it's a time to the JavaScript take over the control. So this kind of utility function would be very helpful for us to identify the DOMs are ready to be used. Otherwise, we can depend on body on load to fire a method so that from there the JavaScript can take over the control. Not only to this, there are other alternatives as well. The, this particular function, for example, the document. This will also will do the similar job. Almost equivalent. So if you want to use this also, you can use, otherwise you can use that. Because it is quite generic function, I can have different actions defined as a string value. Instead of ready, I can keep click. So if any item gets clicked, that particular function will detect it. Otherwise, if you want to know the document state, whether it is ready or not, you can use this function as well. So you can move the functions block here. So it's other alternatives. I'm going to use, probably I'm going to migrate some of the methods to this. If you notice this code, which is already working. So let's see. I'm just going to insert the empty values because I don't have time to fill all this thing. So it just work. I removed one of column because I want to make sure the space is good and being look better in the mobile phone. So I made sure this particular site is mobile compatible already, and the code is already available for you. Hope you already worked out. And this particular code also have a fix for minimum height. So the height, the no special or no additional space is wasted when a site goes into a mobile format, and naturally it will try to fill the space whatever it is available, and naturally it is perfect for our mobile phone. And of course when I extend it, it goes back to a desktop mode. So this particular site, I do have a couple of functions. Event function or maybe the action specific function. Those things were fired when I click clear, register, or edit, delete. Actions. For example, when I try to click the button, started JavaScript function started working, and that part I'm going to move it to a purely jQuery based one. So let's see where the buttons are there. In this case, submit the button, when the button gets clicked on register pressed work. Okay, in this case I've already told you it's a kind of generic function, so could be used for multiple action listening. So to do that, I'm going to move the document ready part to a specific function. A handler function mean a callback function which will be called when document is ready. So I'm just going to move it here. This block, maybe I'll come back a little later, as of now I'll remove. So I want to verify whether it works, because it's always recommended to test each and every state whether okay it works. Already auto layout and other stuff is there, so it is already working. So as far as pretty fine. Now I'm going to write an event listener instead of capturing through the onClick method, I'm going to call through jQuery on, or click also will work, but I would like to use a generic function. So it will try to find the DOM called subject. When it finds a DOM, whenever the DOM gets clicked, it will call this function, and that I can take it forward to, uh, for example, in this case, the subject instead of subject. I think it's submit. Who's that? Another trainer? Seriously, don't encourage someone getting inside the classroom without asking permission. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to do. Whenever a submit button gets clicked, I'd like to execute the onRegister press method. Of course, that is what it was doing. So by logic, whenever the DOM called submit get pressed, of course it will only work with the button. Typically it will also work with other DOMs also, but button has a click event could be fired. So whenever a register button is pressed, it should go ahead and execute this method. Because I was talking in the generic function, not only could be used for document ready state, it can also have a DOM name, and specific DOM action can also be called through this way. So need to find whether it is working or not. You can delete everything. Seriously, it is not working. I tried to register. I tried to press register. It doesn't work. It doesn't add a new line. Something seriously going wrong. Let me see if anything console or any error it try to gives. I don't see any errors as well. But the application doesn't work. So we have to identify the root cause of this issue. Where jQuery has an option to detect an event of a particular DOM or when action performed on a DOM, but it doesn't register anything here because I'm checking when any click event happens on the top of the DOM called submit, but it doesn't register. The reason is quite obvious. I was talking about the tags, of course the file is the document is being read on the top and it reaches to end of the file. So assume when this particular line is executed, naturally there won't be a DOM called submit, because the submit is loaded only after the script block fully loaded. After that only the submit or somewhere it is getting loaded here. So a jQuery would have failed in this case when I tried to find the DOM called submit, because the script block is placed well above to the DOM, which is we are trying to capture the action. So now there would be a problem of putting the JavaScript block in appropriate place. Possible fixes may be, I can take this block, put the script block after the body so that the particular DOM would be ready. You can put as many script block anywhere within your code, and every script block will have a connection with another one also. For example, onRegister pressed can safely call this particular method. There's no problem because the DOM or the script block which is already there. So putting the script block after or probably at the end of your body tag or just before the body tag will make sure the particular DOM is found, so it can listen its actions. We have to verify that again. It works. So the placement is very important, but uh, I cannot guarantee that, like, every time I need to put everything at the end, and of course I need to make sure the DOM is loaded, or some part of a code I define on the top, some part of a code I define at the end. may not be a right place or right practice at all. So the best one maybe alternate fixes. In fact, keeping that script at the just before or just above the body tag end, wherever it ends, is the right practice. In fact, because modern day developers, they don't want to keep the JavaScript part on the top, because JavaScript will additionally load the objects, which will in turn slow down the page loading time. So a lot of developers prefer to keep the script tag at the end of the document. Of course, this is right only, but I'd like to say, like, is there any other alternative also exist? So let me try to take that out. I already have a document ready function. This document ready gets a callback when your document is fully loaded. So in fact, the submit button also would have been loaded when this particular function is called. So you can register the event here. So this is safely a right place because the DOM would have got loaded in that point, and I can put a submit action. Okay, jQuery, please find the DOM called submit and start listening that action. So it may be the right place also to find and start listening the particular DOM action. So in this part, when document ready is called, as it is assumed like the entire DOM is loaded. So it may be working in this case because the submit DOM would have been ready, because document ready function called only after the entire DOM is loaded. Until that, before that time, it won't load. So the document ready function would be handy in this case to register any actions which you want to perform on the top of jQuery. So I have to verify. Let me remove the other one. Oh, it works. Make sure while you test it, make sure you remove the onClick function, because I'm taking the onClick function, I'm registering it through jQuery, not through the DOM itself. In fact, I also removed a body onload also. I moved it through jQuery already, and right now I'm moving the onClick listener, the function also I'm moving to jQuery. So if you really want to register certain thing, you want to make sure the particular action works, you have to make sure the DOM is ready. The very important point of JavaScript is a client-side code. It means it works on a browser and it starts working immediately wherever you declare. So to make it controlled, we have to make sure that DOM, the entire HTML document, is loaded, then properly initiate the JavaScript part. So the basic fixes may be having a document ready function so that the JavaScript part could be started, initialized. Otherwise, keep the JavaScript part at the end of your document so that it is safely could be executed, because in that time all DOMs would have got loaded. And I'm also going to make sure that part now, including the jQuery, I'm going to take every guy. Hereafter, I'm going to keep this jQuery or maybe the script block at the end of the document. Maybe the reason is I don't want to slow down my page loading time, because the script file or JavaScript part is going to be an additional file for HTML document. So we don't want to delay the loading time. So I'm going to keep everything at the end, maybe just above the body tag where it gets ended. So just above that, I'm going to keep it. In fact, JavaScript part could be anywhere, but I have a convention of putting within the body tag. Okay, it works so far. We'll also verify. This is the NetBeans is trying to say that, okay, so script tag is after the body tag may produce unwanted result, because within the body tag only I can identify this required DOMs are getting loaded, because when you go out of the body tag, the JavaScript may not be identifying whether the DOMs are entirely getting loaded. Of course, it's a place where it can work, but our program requirement is we need to identify the DOMs are getting loaded. So most of the DOMs what we are trying to access are located within the body tag only. So it is an appropriate place within the body tag, but maybe just after. Okay, let me see what I need to cut that. I'm just going to remove them. So I just kept it uh, just before the body tag where it gets over. We kept the script block. So hereafter the JavaScript would be kept at the end always, and it not only guarantees that the DOMs are loaded and also reduces the page loading time. Assume one simple scenario: your external file like jQuery minified JavaScript, if it is of 1 MB size, assume if you keep it on the top, your document will be showing the blank page until the 1 MB is fully loaded, and then only the page, the rest of the UI element will start loading. So now that point, the problem is not going to come, because most of the UI part would have been displayed, and maybe the JavaScript part may be loaded a little later, maybe lazy loaded also. So it's a right practice to keep the script tag at the end. But while you keep it, you have to justify why you are keeping that. And of course, now I can safely, instead of body and ready, I can keep it here also, because that DOM would be ready while this JavaScript part start executing. But for code modularity, I would recommend registering any button action. I would recommend it to keep it within the document ready itself. In one point of time, we may want to move the code to on top. That time we should not do the uh, maybe we don't need to modify any code. We can simply copy paste it and move it anyway. So I'm just going to keep it here. Any action which I'm going to register, I'm going to make sure my document is ready. Then only I will be registering it. Other alternate maybe I have one more button I remember. So it's a button on clear pressed, that also I will be moving. This can also be used similar to document ready. On clear pressed. So we have to make sure it works. So everything I'm going to move it within the jQuery part. I'm not going to write anything more on my HTML. And here going to be a problem, because this is a dynamic part. I cannot move this on it pressed, because the particular button is dynamically getting added. It is not in the DOM itself. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. Okay, so the placement is pretty important as far as jQuery concerned. Or sorry, not jQuery at all. It is very important as far as JavaScript part, where you write the functions. So we have to make sure the DOMs are properly loaded. Then we start registering the action associated with them. I was also talking about a couple of other methods of JavaScript array. So that also we'll complete it. Then we'll move on to another exercise. So I'm going to add a couple of buttons. just a couple of buttons I'm going to keep for testing purpose. So clicking this, okay, I'll keep this part here instead of table. So clicking this button will make sure the entry is added not at the end, it will add on the top. So we are using array push, which was adding the item at the end. But we are going to write one more method so that the item is getting added on top instead of the first one. So maybe another one. So add at the end we already have, and delete function we are using splice, but we have also have one more method. Um, Top. Add at the end we already have, so we'll remove the last, and of course one more function to remove first. I'm using CSS. I would prefer to slightly make it bigger. So adding first and removing the first one, removing the last one, and of course removing, adding at the end push we already have it. The register is already doing adding the element at the last, so I don't need to add at last. I don't need to add it because which is already doing here. So let me add couple of functions before add ID. You can do it. It's up to your design logic, so you can add it. So last first. Okay, so let me register those events. First, last. So each functions are going to do a specific work. So add first. I already have on register press something is there. For better clarity, I may be moving this block. Okay. Instead of push, I'm going to use unshift. Unshift will make sure uh, the given element is added on the top of your array, means zeroth index it will add the array. In fact, you can use a splice also to do the job, but I would like to tell there is an option called unshift exist. Remove first item, of course it's going to be for remove. uh, so removing, I don't need to detect the DOM name or something like that, just I'm going to remove them. So removal, I don't need much of stuff here. So let's do this. Popping will make sure the first element is getting removed. So we need to make sure the pop is make sure the first element, whatever the first element is there, will be removed. And of course the last one, it will remove the last element, shift. So be very careful of comparing that. Unshift will make sure the item is added at the top, whereas the pop and shift, pop will remove the first element, the shift will remove the last element. In fact, sometimes I also get confused, so I want to verify that. For that, I need to make sure I have some valid data, so that this is usual one, which is adding the element at the end. So couple of name, I'll keep it. So since I clicked register, it added at the end. Now I'm going to click add first. So it added at the top instead of at the last. So add first will make sure your array element added at the top instead of last. So the unshift and push maybe as a one group. Unshift will add an item at the top of an array. Push will add the item at the end of an array. So you can compare unshift and push as one group. Whereas the delete part, let me add one more item so that the delete we can conclude them. Mm, this is really pathetic. So I added at the end now. So let me see, remove last. I think it's something did. Okay, so I need to identify. So I think vice versa, I also understood slightly wrong maybe. Remove first. What did the same work? Need to identify what exactly went wrong. Remove first, remove last. I hope remove first worked. Okay, it happens. I'll add one more item. So remove last worked, and remove first will make sure the pop up. So the pop actually removes the last element and the shift removes the first element. So make sure your understanding is correct. So shift and pop is on one group, maybe unshift and push maybe in another group. So As for that particular one, push adds the element at the end, whereas unshift adds the element at the top. Uh, whereas shift removes the item at the first, pop remove item at the end. So this combination makes sure you get comfortable. Of course, uh, depends on your requirement. I cannot guarantee that we will be using it again and again, but using this chance because we have created one example which is based off some table. So naturally, it's the right place to test how our array could be put into use. We also show one more option to do a specific index where I can either add or remove an item. So that was called array splice. So all put together, array, I mean JavaScript array has various options to manipulate the contents within that. It is a perfectly index based one. It is same like array list or collection framework, which is equivalent in Java. So if you want to compare that, probably you can compare with that. So as far as the JavaScript array has entire option of indexing it, and of course because of the indexing I can either add to a specific index or I can specifically call either first, last, either add or remove, and of course specific index I can add, remove using array splice. So there are various methods are there. I hope you should get used to it, and as you start adding as you start using them, it will be quite interesting as well. We also saw registering the event in document ready, and we moved our button action clicking from DOM to jQuery itself. So I also make sure that click events are fired and the action is listened, or maybe action is registered as soon as the document ready function is called. It means the document is fully ready. So once I declare it is more than enough, this particular function will be called whenever any action performed on the button. But it should be safely after the DOM is loaded. And in order to avoid confusion, we made sure all script block is kept just below or maybe just above the body tag where it gets end. And in order to achieve the faster page loads, this is also quite useful for us to keep the JavaScript bar below, entirely below and just before the body tag. And it also makes sure sufficient or required DOMs are loaded so the JavaScript can safely take in charge. And even though the DOMs are loaded, I could have kept this function outside or could have declared them as a global, but for a safer side I kept it within the document ready function, because at any point of time if I want to move the code just above the body tag, this code will still work without any issues. So make sure you have a better practice, or you always do the same thing. Whenever you try to write the JavaScript function, that should start working as soon as the page is loaded. Make sure you put a document ready function on the top, and from there you try to register any function. If the function could be called through .click or maybe on and specifying the event name as a string, both will work. And you can also specify on click attribute with the JavaScript function name here. So that will also call the JavaScript function. So whatever way is suitable for you, you can use it. I have no specific guidance or which is the best one, which is the may not be the best one. I don't have any suggestion. It's up to you. Any developer who opt for JavaScript coding, they can choose their comfortable way. But whatever we are doing, you have to make sure you are justifying, okay, the DOM is ready so that it could be accessed from the JavaScript. So you have to make sure the placement of the script tag is justified or put after the DOMs are loaded. So maybe if we do subsequent or maybe additional exercises, we will come to know. I also want to go to the another exercise before I give a task for you to create a calculator layout. I'm just trying to get into a concept called AJAX, dynamic page loading through HTTP. So also I want to give a flexible design, because I am a mobility developer. I do not have much space, so I don't want to waste my space. As far as this design, if you notice, the particular table is a very important one because it shows the list of the student name. Maybe I could have kept the add button somewhere. So clicking the add button bring this particular view instead of always showing this particular view. I could have hide this view By clicking a button or something, the view appears, and once I add the input element, the view disappears, only the table is displayed. I could effectively use the page by hiding unwanted views and keeping the relevant views always visible. So that part maybe I'm going to do in the next exercise. Instead of we use the same layout again and again, I want to move on to an additional example, maybe a simpler one. I'll create a new project. If I don't want to use the same CSS also, maybe I'll use a new exercise as well. Maybe HTML5. I'm going to name it as JQ page load. I mean, I'm going to load the page dynamically with a simple example. Okay, we don't have code here. Now we can do something. I need a jQuery and other code, so I'm going to bring them. If any additional files needed, we'll bring it. Since I'm going to do some simple example, I'm not going to keep a separate maybe JavaScript here. I'm going to keep a button so that pressing the button will do some action. Load. Yes. Load external page or DOM. I'm going to just kept a button. So by clicking the button, it loads an additional content from a different resource. So this is how the JavaScript, I mean, of course, Ajax part also works, because Ajax makes a call to HTTP trying to bring the remote page to a specific DOM. So same example we are going to do, maybe a limited or minimal way. Some extra file name. Since it is an external resource, I am not going to keep any HTML block. I'm just going to keep a relevant. So what I'm going to do here, h1 some information. So this text, I kept it in a file called extrafile.html, which is an external file, which is not the part of index.html. But this file is going to be loaded in this index.html using jQuery. So I'm going to make sure the jQuery is added. This is very important. jQuery should be ready to do that. Script block. I prefer document ready. In fact, it is not needed also. I have a button, the ID card. Something. So I'm registering if any action performed on the button would be called using this function. This empty DOM, I'm going to give a DOM ID saying result. Any name you can give, but I'm going to keep it as the result because the result new page is going to get loaded here. As soon as the button is pressed, DOM ID called load new page will have additional file called load. Load is a function. You can specify the additional or external file here. So in this case, it is extra file.html. Make sure this spelling is correct. Okay. So whenever the button is pressed, this DOM will receive the external DOM which is specified in a different file, and the DOM will sit here. Let's see if that pass works. In fact, yeah, it really worked. But oh my god, instead of result I added the content to the button DOM itself. That's why it is added on the button itself. I need to make sure that this loaded in a result. So the external DOM which was there in the additional file could be loaded in one more DOM called a result when any action performed, and of course the action in this case was a button click. When I click a button, JavaScript, of course in this case jQuery, makes a HTTP connection, loads the external file. Why this external file I am calling? Because remember, these are all the file system hosted in a local host. So any attempt to bring the data, the particular server should make a contact through HTTP. Through HTTP only this file is getting loaded, even though it is just an adjacent file. But the HTTP works in a separated logic. So any communication made to the server, when the page is served, it disconnects itself. So even though the same page exists in the same directory, it will be an another call. So the page is asynchronously loaded, and of course it is loaded into a different DOM and through using a method called load. This opens various other opportunities. For example, I'll also show you some of the way, a typical way we were doing. Sort of button, I think I can do some other one. Keep it as a button itself to start with. I have one more example to do that. Okay. The advantage of loading this asynchronous page, you don't refresh the page doesn't get refreshed, the URL doesn't get changed, the URL remains the same one. There is, for example, if you want to really load the second page, the other option was extra file.html. You need to fully modify the URL and then only you can get the additional content. But in this case, the content was dynamically loaded within the DOM itself behind the screen. It happened through a background process. So when a button is clicked, the particular DOM is getting loaded. If you notice, view page source, you will get back the same HTML, but you won't see the additional content here because it's still blank, because it was loaded using JavaScript after the particular page is ready. If you really want to see what happened to a DOM, you can use the inspect element to identify any changes happened to a body tag. If you notice, in this case the h1 tag is sitting here, which is dynamically loaded, and of course your JavaScript block. But whereas you can't find this thing by right clicking here, but it was loaded a little later, so that developer tool have access to it, and of course it is displaying this particular DOM has got loaded. And when you load a DOM, or when you load an external DOM to one of our DOM here, it also becomes local, so it can be accessed. For example, I want to change the title. I'll add one more function. Getting bored of using the click function, so I'll write a conventional specific. Okay. Change text some. I'll have to give an ID. So I give an something txt, something like that. So I can safely change the text to something else. So when another button is clicked, the text which was loaded may be changed. First we'll see. So this is the default text. I can change the text. So the DOM becomes too local, even though it is an external DOM which is loaded through an additional file. But after it is loaded to a particular context, in this case this document, that DOM became local, so the DOM ID can also be accessible. The txt, the DOM ID, you may wonder where is the txt tag here. But of course it is there. After the content is loaded, the DOM would be there, and of course it will start working. But still the placement is still an important one. First point, by clicking this point there is no DOM exists called txt because the DOM is not loaded yet. After clicking it only the DOM could be accessed. So when I click it, it is trying to search a DOM ID called txt. Of course it would be there because the DOM is loaded here. Now it can be accessed. So make sure you follow an hierarchy. The specific DOM is ready so it can be accessed safely. So still you have to make sure the DOM is ready and it can be put into use. Otherwise, there is one more option, maybe a better option. This load function also have a callback method called this way. When a DOM is fully loaded, it will behave as an additional document ready because this extra.html is loaded. This block, the particular txt would be there so that it can be safely called. I'll reproduce a scenario where this particular requirement may be needed. I'm going to keep it. Instead of on click, I'm going to say okay. Now I can safely listen the change text function click events because at this point the extra file.html would have got loaded and any attempt to modify the DOM called txt will work and it is safe as well. So literal understanding of this is when DOM called extra file is loaded, after that only you start registering the function callbacks, and that any attempt to click that function callback will eventually change the text, because this time the txt would be there safely. But you don't need to make this much complex. The previous methodology will still work because jQuery is a kind of a document safe function. For example, if it doesn't find a document ID or maybe a DOM ID, it will still work without triggering any errors. Whereas if you do not use jQuery, you will have troubles. Let's see whether this part works or not. It works, so no problem for us. If you do not use a jQuery, so in this point the txt DOM is not there, but I don't see any error. But instead of jQuery, if I try to do that using document get element by ID, now this particular part throwing an error because I skipped jQuery. I tried to do it through a conventional JavaScript methodology, where I tried to access non-existing DOM, which is called txt, is throwing me an error. Maybe after loading it won't throw an error, because if you are using document get element by ID without, using jQuery, you have to make sure the DOM is fully loaded, then only this function will not make any issues. Whereas if you use the equivalent of jQuery, if a particular DOM ID is not found, but it won't throw an error, still won't trouble your document, and it won't pull your document to where it will end your whatever page loading. So in this case, the DOM is still not loaded, but when I try to click change text, I don't see any error. So using jQuery is pretty document safe, because if a particular document ID is not found, jQuery won't collapse your code, which will still keep the code intact. Whereas if you are using document get element by ID by skipping jQuery, if the DOM is not found, it will start throwing an error. So make sure you understand the difference between uh, the normal document get element by ID. So if you really want to use document get element by ID, the only possible way is move this code inside this callback, make sure the DOM is loaded. If you do not use jQuery, of course the part of the jQuery is still there, but I'm trying to access a non-existing DOM. So this won't produce any error, because that particular DOM we are making sure that external file is loaded, then only we start listening the action of a button. So at this point external DOM is loaded, now it will work. So if you are using non-existing DOMs, you still want to have your code safely kept and which doesn't affect the page loading. It is recommended to use jQuery, because jQuery is document safe, and if a DOM is not found also, the code won't break and it will continue to run. Okay. Kind of exception throwing like that you can imagine. So it's up to you. So I'm going to use the document dot load, DOM ID dot load quite often, because I can make something visible invisible using this way. In fact, I can not only load text, I can load entire HTML file. So probably the previous exercise, I could make this particular part hidden, by keeping one button called add, I can bring this view, then display wherever it is needed, then I hide it if not required. But it may not be useful as of now, as we have to see a couple of other examples. Then we will come back to this particular example and see whatever way we could put into use. The final example I was talking about, you have to create a layout, a calculator layout. Maybe I think JavaScript calculator looks like. Maybe I don't want the complex layout design, maybe a simple design. I like this. Maybe this also. I think this kind of, I mean, not so sketchy. Make sure you're pretty organized. So you have to create a simple layout, which is having input text on the top and couple of buttons specified and aligned properly, and clicking the button, the input text field values are changed, and clicking arithmetic operation, it does the arithmetic operation and displays the result. That you need to do it. Of course, I will also write the code maybe after the break or sometime, or maybe I'll write it while you also write it. If you could not finish it, of course I'll explain how I did. Maybe a couple of hints I can leave. For arithmetic operation in JavaScript, there is a simple function called evaluate. Just 1 second. This function can easily evaluate, for example, this function can easily evaluate any arithmetic operation you write. It can easily perform the mathematical operation. So this function I am going to use to make this calculator. So as user type whatever, when you click equal, it will perform an evaluate function, and then it will bring the result. If you really want to see that, I may change text. I'll do that part. It does. So it performed the arithmetic calculation. Once I click on it, of course, uh, addition, multiplication. You don't need to worry about the mathematical expression, how things are working. So you can simply use this function to make your calculator working effectively. Anyway, the calculator design, what you're going to do is going to contain only the basic arithmetic operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. I don't really want to have a complex design or something. Maybe you can keep, in my understanding, there's going to be uh, number digits like starting from 0 to 9, so 10 buttons, and 4 buttons goes for various arithmetic calculation, and equal button, so 14 15 buttons, and clear button maybe, so so almost 16. If you really, maybe the dot, which will put a decimal point, so 17 buttons totally, in my understanding it is going to come. But what I'm going to see is your layouting technique. Typically I'm not going to see how your calculator really works, but if it works I would appreciate, because in JavaScript evaluation is pretty simple and the mathematical evaluation is pretty simple. uh, but only thing, I want to see a nice look and feel, the layout, in fact similar layout you produce using CSS on JavaScript, whatever way. And also you have to make sure it is mobile ready. Whatever size of your document, the buttons, individual buttons also should be automatically adjusted so that it looks proper in the cell phones and it also looks proper in the desktop. So that task I'm going to give it to you, and of course you are going to do that within end of the day today. Is it possible? Can it be done? Can it be done? Yes or no? Okay. No try. Pretty simple. See. it's you don't need to think like it is going to be complex anyways, because as you start you'll get the point and it will be very easy. In fact, I'm going to write after some time, so we can finish safely today. And of course, you also do a simple example on this. Keep the DOM and trying to keep it in a different places, whether it is working or not. Identify them. Meanwhile, I'll also publish the source code to the developer site. Maybe I'll do that right away. In fact, the source code is already there in this, but I put an alternate source code. If you search through the site, you will find the source code of a calculator, because the same task I gave for previous batches. But I would appreciate you do it with your own code logic. So the last one I've already put, even though it is a small example, but try to put the script tag at the end and try to register and try to play around with how JavaScript indexing works. I mean, JavaScript array index works. So make sure you understand the difference between array push, array pop, array shift, array unshift. Each has a different path. Push and unshift is one group, pop and shift in one group. So which one does the adding job, which one does the removal job, please understand that. So do this exercise first, then you can do an additional exercise plus the calculator design. Okay, I uploaded both the source code. You can start your hands-on part.